that time when God forbid you use Himiko Nova with E0 Welt instead of E4 Welt, so your damage immediately gets cut in half. Yeah, welcome to Star Rail, where E4 is considered zero cost. No, because isn't it weird how some characters have missing parts of their kit only to be locked by E1 or even E2? Prime example of that is Fugue doing close to nothing other than being a walking talent at E0 S1, but suddenly becoming a pocket Ron Mei at E1. Like, you cannot convince me that the devs paid absolutely no mind to the fact that her skill does literally nothing until you get her E1, which even so is only effective to the character the skill is on. And I know the devs were brainstorming ideas on what to make her E2, and someone was just like, what's the one thing the original Tingyun was known for? Oh right, spamming dance dance dance. But wait, the new Tingyun is an Ahility. Whatever could we possibly do? And so they just plopped its effect into E2. Another one which I absolutely hate to admit because I'm a little biased, but it is true nonetheless, is Evanesia. I personally have her E1 myself, but god, whenever I see someone using her at E0, it's like something's missing, you know? Her talent not really doing anything but throwing out the fox and well, that's it, is weird to say the least because in my opinion, her E1 should have been in base kit, especially since E0 players don't get to witness her Labubu, which I mean, let's be for real, how cool is that? How many characters do you know that have a whole Labubu in their combat? Next up, I want to talk about the characters which are genuinely unplayable until you turn broke, I mean, get them E2. Now, these characters are usually DPSs since most of the time the character itself is good, but has some problems which can't really get fixed by typical means because their kits would interfere with that, such as Fainon not being able to get action advanced forward in his ultimate state and basically bleeding action value. So to sort of unconventionally solve that problem, they just gave him double the actions at E2 and called it a day. Same with characters like Firefly, Castorus, Himiko Nova despite releasing like 3 weeks ago, Silverwolf level 999, etc. Or on the other side of the same coin are the sub DPSs like Evernight and Sparksea who decided to become dedicated DPSs at E2 and completely forgetting about the utility part in their kit which now renders it useless. But the absolute biggest E2 fraud has got to be Cyrene with her busted E2 that solves her entire kit's problem which got doom boosted for weeks on end. Getting her E2 is the equivalent of getting a pencil and then paying someone to turn that pencil's graphite into a diamond. This monumental E2 is only maybe matched by E2 Mortonag's blade, but it still doesn't come close to the effect Cyrene has. And anyway, speaking of effect, Chibi may not be an E2 merchant, but god, playing her at E0 makes you feel like you're missing out big time. And you are. Speaking from experience, her E1 is easily the best supportive E1 in the game, and I honestly blame Robin for this because she was the one who started the E1 over S1 gimmick for supports. The founding father of the title of E2 merchant and the turn doubling on E2 gimmick is Imbiber Lune, being the first character to actually have really good Eidolons and an amazing vertical investment, which also made him a top 3 DPS for a long time, carrying 1.x patches and only really falling off when Acheron released. On the topic of 1.x characters, the release of Dan Heng didn't really seem to inspire the devs to create Eidolons like that anymore until way later on, seeing as how characters like Jing Liu had some of the worst Eidolons ever despite being in the top 3 DPSs for a pretty long amount of time. But the actual worst of the bunch easily goes to my lustrous Knight of Beauty, Argenti, who got the worst treatment for Eidolons ever. I mean, look at this. When using ultimate ignores 30% of enemy targets defense. They did him so dirty with that because it's really funny how even Mose has better scaling Eidolons as him while being a 4-star. And speaking of 4-stars, Misha, being a bounce ultimate center character like Argenti, has some amazing Eidolons that solve exactly what Argenti is missing. More bounce, more damage buff for said bounce, bounce related debuffs, so on and so forth. Okay, I'm gonna have this as its own segment because of the effect of Welt's Novaflare crushed the cost system as a whole and how normalized having his broken E4 is. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you all, I am unfortunately on the E4 Welt bandwagon since it genuinely is a game breaker, and I may have also used all my golden companion spirits on getting his Eidolons, but anyway, Welt used to have some pretty generic 1.0 standard banner Eidolons. It was just mainly used for reducing the speed of enemies, and that's pretty much it. So came his bombshell of a Novaflare, and now he's better than most debuffers in the game. What changed? Well, his E1 and E6 are focused on him as a DPS, which literally nobody ever expected. His E2 gives him extra energy to give him a faster ult gain. Okay, pretty solid so far. Then you see his 4th Eidolon that completely make or breaks someone's account. Enemy targets in the waitlist state have their all-type resistance reduced by 30%. Yeah, seems simple enough on paper, but in practice, it is a huge DPS increase for literally anyone you play him with. All around great upgrade, right? If that's a standard character Novaflare, I'm sure the other Oh, I hear the sound of bricks for some reason. Yeah, no. Welt was giving head pats and a kiss on the cheek, while most of the other novaflares got a pat on the back and that's it. I spoke about Jingliu in the previous section having bad scaling Eidolons, but god, they really didn't care to fix that even after the novaflare. They really just gave her 12% more crit damage and 1 extra hit on her E1. Blade isn't any different either, considering how they changed his E4 to do, well, the same thing. And mind you, his original Eidolons weren't even that good to begin with. His E6 is just a modern day E2, but I guess he understood that and made it his own. To top this off, I feel like it'd be the most appropriate to talk about the characters who don't need Eidolons to be good and just really want horizontal investment more than their vertical investment. Great examples of this are definitely characters like Acheron, Aglaya, and Ashvale wanting their dedicated supports or DPS that do perfectly fine in E0 situations. Some like Silverwolf level 999 or Firefly are like that, where they do have their dedicated support / sub DPS that they can't really work without, but they are still tied to getting their E2 right after getting them, so take that as you may. All that aside though, there's no one who does this better than Professor Anaxa, being the OG king of E0 3-cost teams. Now, this is mainly because of the fact that Anaxa has probably the most synergistic team comp ever with Cyrene, Saridra, and RMC, and having such perfect complementary kits with each other means that his investment strategy would be getting them first over his Eidolons, unlike Finon for example. To be an E2 fraud or not to be? That is the question you gotta think about when pulling for some of these characters. But jokes aside, you can pull for whoever you want, however you want. I mean, look at me. I use Finon at E0 Ceridraless and E2 Sereniless, and I'm happy. So pull for whoever you want, pull a like and subscribe on the video too, and I will see you in the next one.